More than anything, traditional buyer agents want for you as a home buyer to believe that their services are free to you as a buyer. They tell you that, hey, you don't have to worry about compensating me because my commission comes from the seller. And this is the biggest and most costly lie in all of real estate. That's why I want to create this video to clear it up so that you as a home buyer really understand how a traditional buyer agent is compensated and how they are adding a ton of money to not just the initial purchase price of the home, but if you're financing your home, they're adding a ton to how much you're paying monthly and especially how much you're paying in total interest. So this is a video that could literally save you tens of thousands of dollars. And before we go any further, just if you're into this kind of thing, like you want the inside scoop on real estate, please subscribe to the channel, give this a like so that the YouTube algorithm can do its thing and get this in front of other people who really want to understand real estate from the inside out. So let's talk about buyer agent compensation and at least how it's worked out traditionally. So you as a home buyer, you call up your agent and they tell you, hey, yeah, I'd be happy to show you homes. And when it comes time, I'll put together the offer for you, handle the paperwork, help you with negotiations, and go through inspections so that you successfully close. Once we close, here's the best part. You don't pay me a dime. All of my compensation is going to be paid by the seller, which sounds great, right? But nothing in life is truly free. And here's the thing, sellers are not running a charity. And in many cases, the way that compensation has been arranged is through what's called cooperative compensation, which is just basically where the seller has an upfront agreement with the listing agent where they're saying, okay, I'll pay total of 6% commission. 3% of that is going to go to the listing agent. 3% of that is going to go to the buyer agent. But that commission amount, it's getting baked into the sales price that one, the seller lists their home at, and two, the bottom dollar that the seller is actually willing to accept. So on paper, it might look like the seller is paying your agent's fee, but they're not just eating that cost out of the goodness of their heart. They have taken into account how much that 3% is that's going to your buyer agent, and they've just tacked that on to the lowest price that they're willing to accept for their home. So let's think about this logically, right? Because in any transaction, there's only one party who's actually bringing any money to the table, and that's you, the buyer. And what the seller is doing is they're just taking that money that you're bringing to the table and they're passing it through to whoever it is that needs to be paid off. That is to say that when a seller agrees to pay your buyer agent's commission, let's just say 3% here, well, they're not actually having to reach into their own pocket to pay that. They're just accounting for it in the sales price of the home, right? Like it's a semantical sleight of hand to make you as the buyer think that the seller is paying for it. But if there was no buyer agent that needed to be compensated, well, then the seller would either net more money or they would be willing to give you more credits or reduce the purchase price by that 3% that otherwise is going to an agent. And that's really the way to think about it. It's just that 3% that's going to your buyer agent, like that is a real transaction cost. And while it might look like the seller is paying it, it's adding to the cost that you are ultimately paying for the home. Like if you were to eliminate that service, you could reduce the cost of the home and the transaction by that 3%. Let's just talk about some real numbers here. Like, let's say you're buying an $800,000 home and you have an agreement where your buyer agent is going to get paid 3% commission. Well, that's $24,000. And let's say that in this case, the seller is willing to compensate your agent the 24 grand so that you're not having to pay for it out of pocket. Well, they're accounting for that $24,000 in the list price or in the sale price of the home. So when you finance that home, you're spending $24,000 more than you had to because you have an agent. And that $24,000 financed at, let's just say, a 6% interest rate over 30 years. Well, that adds $144 a month to your payment. That's $27,800 in additional interest, or the grand total is you are paying $51,800 to have a buyer agent representing you when you count in all of the extra interest added to that loan. I mean, that's a lot of money, right? Like $144 a month. Like that's a nice vacation every year. And that's just what really kills me about this whole myth, right? Is that your free buyer agent actually just added $51,800 to the total cost of your home. Bravo, free agent, free services. Insane. And of course, buyer agency creates a whole host of other issues. Steering is a big one, right? Like for sellers that don't offer market rate compensation, buyer agents will often steer home buyers away from those homes. For home sellers that offer higher than average buyer agent commissions, this happens in the new construction world all the time, where builders will offer 3.5% in order to try and entice buyer agents to steer their clients towards one builder over another. Like these kinds of things are just built into this whole misaligned incentive structure with buyer agents that just drives me mad. So there's more videos and content, and again, just another reason to subscribe to the channel. But this lie on buyer agents being free is the one that I really want to hit home on, and it's my number one argument for why you should learn how to represent yourself. If you are able to remove the buyer agent and successfully represent yourself, well, on that $800,000 home, I mean, that means freeing up 24 grand that you could negotiate in seller credits or reduced purchase. I mean, even if you only got half of that, like $12,000, like that's still $12,000. And then when you factor in all of the interest and payments, like that's over 24 grand that you're still saving on the house compared to if you had an agent representing you. And what the conversation always needs to come back to is like cost versus value. Like, does a buyer agent on an $800,000 home actually add 24,000, much less $52,000 of value to a transaction? And I'm saying this as somebody who's been a buyer's agent. Like, in most cases, no. No, they don't. They don't add that much protection. They don't add that much value. Like most buyer agents can't even negotiate on an $800,000 home, couldn't negotiate a $20,000 reduction to even justify their fee. So the cost versus value on having a buyer agent, at least in this traditional structure, it just makes no sense to me. Maybe it does to you. Let me know in the comments if you've got thoughts here. But the savings alone seems to be really, really beneficial reason to learn how to represent yourself. So the key takeaway here is if you are hiring a buyer agent, just want you to really think through the total cost of their compensation and don't fall for the line that a buyer agent is free. Because even if it looks on paper like the seller is willing to pay them, you need to think to yourself, okay, but that 15, 18, 20, $25,000 that my buyer agent is getting paid is money that I could have leveraged some other way, whether as a purchase price reduction or as a closing cost credit. Like if the seller didn't have to pay my agent they would be willing to part with that 3% in ways that probably be more advantageous to you. So I want you to just at least consider that, and then have the conversation with your buyer agent if you're still planning to hire one, to just say, hey, like, how do you justify your compensation? Talk me through the actual value that you're going to add in this transaction. How are you going to save me time? How are you going to save me stress? How are you going to protect me financially from making a bad decision? Ask some of the uncomfortable questions about, how do I know you're not going to steer me towards homes where sellers are offering to pay your compensation, or offering broker bonuses, or some of the shenanigans like that? Like, have some of those uncomfortable conversations. And if you do decide that a buyer agent just isn't worth it, well, hey, I'm Nick, and I would love to help teach you how to successfully represent yourself. So do be sure to follow, get in touch with me, and we can go from there. But let me know in the comments what you think, if this is thought provoking, if you've tried to represent yourself but run into issues and you want to see those addressed on the channel. I'm here for all of it. Thanks for coming along in this one. Look forward to seeing you in the next one.